tomorrow marks the fall of Corregidor, the day when the entire Philippines was surrendered by the United States to the Japanese Imperial Army. Today, you will learn why we are commemorating that event. You will learn of the sacrifices not only of the soldiers who fought during the war, but also of the sacrifices of the Filipino people, an entire nation, to give us the legacy of our freedom.
On April 9, 1942, after 4 months of intense and bitter fighting, and with only a few days' worth of quarter rations, Major General Edward King was forced to surrender his troops on Bataan, consisting of 63,000 Filipinos and 12,000 Americans. Most of the men were suffering from disease and starvation. The Imperial Japanese Army were not equipped to transport the prisoners to Camp O'Donnell, some 60 miles away. The men were forced to march under extreme tropical conditions with no provisions for food, water, or shelter. Those who could no longer walk were subjected to beatings, bayoneting, and in some cases, decapitation. And those civilians who tried to help were subjected to the same atrocities. Between 10 to 15,000 Filipinos and about 750 Americans died during the march. A month later, on May 6, General Jonathan Wainwright surrendered Corregidor and the rest of the Philippine Islands. Inside Camp O'Donnell, another 30,000 died. And after a majority of the Filipinos were released, the American troops were moved to other prison camps and eventually moved outside the Philippines to different labor camps located in Japan, Formosa, China, and Korea. Over 2,100 American troops perished in these so-called hell ships by French.
I must have passed out. I woke up feeling this searing heat on my back. I tried to move, but it was so heavy. Oh God! There were bodies on top of me, burned alive. And the only reason I'm alive is because they're dead.
It's over now, Pepito. It's over.
It's not over.
Safe.
No.
Please don't speak anymore.
Can't you see? I can still hear the madness, like the howlings of the devil, like the wailing of the dying. I must speak, or else I'll go mad. Death was all around us. Men crying for their mothers as they took the last breath. Even those who didn't believe in God paid to end their misery. I was so tired. All I wanted to do was to lay on the ground and sleep. One day was forever fucking next to a ball of ice. I think we had not eaten for days, and the only waters we could drink was from the side of the road. Their rice was like manna from heaven. The men we jumped, and the men we scampered, and we jumped for every tiny piece of kernel. But those fucking devils, they started firing. I knew Nestor was good instantly. I'm sorry. I can see blood coming out of his chest. Those fucking, they wouldn't even let me touch him. I tried to help him. I tried to help him one day. I'm sorry.
Until now, I dream about them. They are good. Because they died so young to defend our country, the Philippines and the United States.
Building, we could look over the 18-foot stone wall, and we could see the military prisoners on the other side. And some of them had been on Bataan, and some of them had been on Corregidor, but all of them were in such bad shape they couldn't be shipped over to Japan for slave labor. During the Battle of Manila, 100,000 Filipino civilians died in the destruction. And later in the month, in February, the 11th Airborne made a spectacular raid on the last morning, and they killed the guards. They had amphibious tractors that went around behind the Japanese division, and they brought thousands of prisoners out without, there wasn't one casualty in the rescuing troops, and there wasn't one casualty in the prison. What happened? The Japanese were so enraged that they went in and killed 1,500 Filipinos. My point that I want to make today is that the Filipinos bore the brunt of battle. And despite bearing the brunt of battle, the Filipinos remain loyal to the cause of freedom. I would like to honor those and salute those that are here tonight.
We as a people are very patriotic. And at the first call that we are needed to defend our country, we are there, no matter what and where we are. Being in Fort Santiago for 6 months and being tortured. You can never imagine when we were sent to the chamber where all the prisoners were taken, you couldn't hear one word, but one word is mother. And they will always call, Nanay, Nanay, where are you? That's what they're saying. To interpret it will always be, Diyos ko po, oh my God, where are you, mother? And to all of us, as Filipinos and as patriotic as we are, I have nothing to say but to leave you with 3 little words. The love of our country
has always been remembered as the biggest single surrender in U.S. military history. And because of the stigma of surrender, these men and women have never been honored. What Bataan did was to delay the timetable of the Japanese Imperial Army. It prevented them from occupying Australia. And if these Filipino and Americans did not hold on, despite massive hunger, massive disease, massive deaths, the Japanese Imperial Army would have reached Australia, and we'll be seeing a different political landscape now. The delay enabled the Allied forces to harness the resources that eventually turned the tide of war and let the Allied forces eventually win the war. We must also remember both Americans, Filipinos, there were even Czechs. I'm sure there were other nationalities who fought there side by side. But we must remember too that 7/8 of the military line of resistance were manned by Filipinos. They did most of the fighting and the dying, ratio of more than 10-1. And yet, 5 months after the war ended, on February 1946, the Filipinos were barred from receiving their rightful benefits. To this day, these rights have not been restored. Now I want to call on all of you to please spread the legacy of Bataan. The legacy of Bataan is the freedom that these men and women sacrificed their lives for. I'm also calling on everyone, on the Filipino community, and I mean not just Filipinos who were born in the Philippines, Filipino Americans, Filipinos abroad, all over the world. As you know, there are over 4 million Filipinos here in the United States, and yet the Filipinos are still sometimes the invisible race. We have a great heritage. We fought for the freedom not only of the Philippines, but of this country. The Philippines was a colony of the United States. And that's why we must set aside the emotional toll of war. We must set aside the economic, the regional, the cultural differences that divide us. We are one. It's not just the Filipino nation. Everyone in this room, Americans, Filipinos, all nations, because we all value our freedom.